Hey everybody, Beau Billington here. Thanks so much for joining. I got Dennis Kirwan here. Thanks for
Nice to
joining.
meet everyone. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, finding the next gear is a relatively new podcast, and it's really around interviewing and having discussions with high growth entrepreneurs, and really trying to get underneath kind of the not just the what and the where, but the why and the how. Like, how did you actually start a company? Because a lot of times, we all have ideas, but how do you take something from inception, an idea, to creating a business and then actually the scaling, which I think is probably the hardest part about entrepreneurship. But we'll get into that. So prior to kind of jumping into things, you always like to start with the who. So who are you? You're CEO of Dymec, of course, and been doing it for quite some time, about 8 years. But tell us a little bit about who you are, where you grew up, and kind of where you came from until now.
Yeah. Since you asked where I came from, I'll say that I was born and raised in Sacramento, and then I moved to Southern California during high school, actually. So I think one of the things that made me who I am is a bit of a turbulent upbringing. So
Sure.
Didn't have the stable household situation, or money was always tight, that sort of thing. And so, when I moved to Los Angeles, I actually moved in with my grandmother, and she was one of the more stable, successful, kind of the
Sure.
matriarch of the family, and someone that took me in, and but at the same time didn't give me anything. And so she made me work for everything. I moved in right before I turned 15 years old, and she said, "Hey, you're about to turn 15. I'm sure you don't want me shopping for you for your clothes and everything else. If you want to buy your own stuff, you're going to have to get a job." And so as soon as I was legal to work, I was already working, I think, at 15 and a half.
Right.
And I started working and saving right away. And so I think the first lesson that she taught me was how to just be responsible, and how to make money and use that money wisely. So
That's awesome.
yeah, it was nice to step into that environment, but even that was compared to how things are nowadays, was still pretty tight. I literally, when I lived with my grandmother, believe it or not, looking back, it's kind of wild. At the time, it seemed kind of cool, but I was living in a really what was a tool shed in her backyard.
Right.
So for me at the time, it felt like, oh, I got my own guest house. I have my own privacy. This is cool.
Sure.
But
Sounds like a dream,
back,
actually, for a 15-year-old.
yeah, it would. At the time, thankfully, I didn't feel like it was terrible. Plus, sadly, it was kind of an upgrade from where I was coming from. So, it built a lot of character, I guess.
Yeah.
And I found ways to enjoy it. I enjoyed working. I enjoyed being able to have a fresh start. And I think that really propelled me into becoming an adult fast, because when I turned 18, the first thing she said was, "Well, you're 18, so where are you moving, and where's my rent in the meantime?" As soon as I turned 18, I had to start paying rent. And I was like, well, if I'm gonna pay rent, I'm not gonna live with grandma anymore. And so I quickly moved out, I'd say within a few months after turning 18, and got an apartment with a friend. Kind of the rest is history. But that's how I got down to Southern California from Northern California. I kind of stayed down here since.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. So I started working at 15 and a half ish as well. Never was good at saving until I got in the latter part of my years, but I was great at spending, and I enjoyed work, which was great. And similar story, after I graduated college, a lot of my friends were moving home for 6 months or a year, trying to figure out what's next. My mom was like, "Hey, appreciate it, but not going to happen. Go find your own place, get your own thing, and go get a real job." And so I did that. And I think that was the big difference in kind of where I've gone with my career, and where things could have been. So I appreciate that segue. So talk a little bit about Dymec, and how did you get excited about, working, like owning your own digital agency?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those stories where just, one thing led to another. I had different ideas and different things that I tried and didn't work out as I was young. I think one of the setbacks of having to, be on my own so fast was that I had to jump right into the working world. And it was very difficult to get through college, because I could only go part-time, and I had to do that on the side and work full-time ever since I was 18. So that journey was a lot of trying to find, what it is that I like doing,
Sure.
and where can I be successful. And for me, that was always a big motivator, was not continuing to live in the life style, so to speak, that I had as a kid, because frankly, when I was young, I mean, there were times where I was literally hungry and, didn't have clothes to wear. And I think that in a way sort of scarred me a bit, where I didn't want to ever have to experience that again. And I think more recently I've had a business coach, and this, I guess, was a few years back, and then I'll kind of go back to where we were. But I never really knew what was my big motivation. I just said, I've always felt very driven. I've always feel like I've had this entrepreneurial spirit, but I don't know where it came from. Maybe it's just the way I was wired or born. And, that could be part of it for sure. But, what she uncovered, my old business coach, what she said, I think you're driven by fear and also wanting to feel safe.
Right.
And so, coming from a turbulent upbringing, I don't know, for me, made me not want to go back there. And so I think there's always that grit and that drive to, do well for myself and provide for my family.
Yeah, I think fear and anxiety can be a great motivator. In fact, one of the podcasts that I have coming up is with a clinical psychologist, and it's all around fear and how we can leverage it and harness it. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but that's interesting. And I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs have the same story as you, where there's something in their life that happened that pushed them in one direction, so they could basically kind of overcome earlier feelings in their lives, i.e., fear, anxiety, where's my next meal coming from, et cetera.
Yeah, it's almost ironic, because at the time that I was told that, I felt like I was very fearless. I've always felt like I'll take on any challenge. I will, jump in any business idea that I believe in without worry of what's going to happen, and keep my eye on the prize. And I realized that it was something more subconscious, and something that is now ingrained in me. And it wasn't a conscious thought necessarily, but once she explained everything to me and I thought about it, I said, I think you're right. I think that's where this is coming from. So it's a really interesting, moment and realization that, what you think an entrepreneur is, or what their, makeup is, it could be different for everyone. But for me, I think that was and is the big driver.
Sure. No, I can appreciate that. And so in that vein, how long have you been an entrepreneur? So you've owned your company for 8 years or so, but prior to us jumping on the recorded line, you basically alluded that you've been kind of doing your own thing for much longer than that.
Yeah, I have to say, I think I've been an entrepreneur since I was a kid, maybe living that. I remember when up in Sacramento, at least, I remember the time that there was a time where the truck coming around once a week to pick up the recycled goods wasn't a thing. At least in my neighborhood, I don't remember that being a thing. But I do remember the time I went with my mother to recycle a bunch of cans that we had saved, and I realized, wow, we got actual money for that. And so something clicked in me, and I thought it was a great idea. Well, why don't I go around our neighborhood, and tell people that I will collect all the recyclables and recycle them for them. And so I tried to make a business flyer at her work, printed out something on a piece of, it was just a regular printer, and made these flyers that said, at this time, this date, leave your recycled goods on the, I think cans is all I was going for, on your doorstep, and they will be, picked up between this hour and this hour. And I made it this whole environmental thing to make people want to recycle. And I think I kind of learned that from school too. I remember hearing about recycling at school probably around that time. So I just put two and two together, and I started recycling the cans of my neighbors to make a little bit of money, so that I was probably in 6th grade or something at that time. So I think from that moment forward, I've always had this drive and this interest in finding, ways to make a business.
That's great. It seems like most entrepreneurs do as well. I was, I think it was around 15, 16, 17. I started mowing grass, which I know a lot of folks do, but it was kind of like I had this drive, this innate ability as well to kind of go out and get business, and knock on doors, and a little bit fearless. And maybe there was some of that fearlessness came from my growing up as well. But it's funny how we all had early things that we were doing, which eventually, became our day jobs later.
Right.
So that's
And
great.
I think that was your question was, how did I get to where I am now? So I think that was the beginning. I guess the point I was making is that I feel like I kind of got into this industry by accident. I started working for other businesses at first when I was 18, stable, more mainstream companies. I think my first real job out of high school was working for Lexus. And from there, I actually met one of the Lexus customers. And I think that he was very interested in having me work for his venture capital company, raising money for startups. And, looking at the car that he drove, which was a nice brand new, at the time, 1998 GS 400 with all the bells and whistles. I was like, man, that car, if I could just have a car like that, I'd be stoked. And, he just seemed like a guy who had it really put together and was doing well, and said, he asked me what I was making there. And I told him, and he said, well, if you work for me, you're going to make at least twice that much. So that was an easy decision to put in my notice and go to work for him. And, him being one of their customers, I think they were happy to see me kind of level up and go work for that guy. And so I got into the venture capital world and got into sales and started, helping generate leads for their venture capitalists to ultimately bring clients on board and raise money for startups. And I think as technology advanced and digital marketing became more part of the equation for those startups, I think that's when it started to become more interesting to me. The last recession that happened back in, what was it, 07, 08, right around there. That one definitely, I felt that, I had eventually started my own venture capital company after working in venture capital for a number of years. And, I started raising money for startups through my own business. And of course, when the last recession happened, people weren't exactly looking to put money into startups at that time. People were, being cautious. And so things slowed down really fast. And I suddenly was in a situation where I needed to figure out a way to pivot and make money, because the music stopped pretty quickly in that world at that time. And so one of my buddies that was still doing quite well, even during the recession, he actually recommended that I reach out to this internet marketing company. And they were an Inc. 500 internet marketing company, specifically specializing in search engine optimization, which was really a hot market at that time, especially. I think there was a bit of a gold rush going on in that market. And so salespeople were doing very well there. And so, I thought maybe it was a good fit. And at the same time, I was hungry and I needed to make money.
Sure.
And so I went there, interviewed, got a job, and I started all over again. I started at the bottom. They made me a telemarketer. It was the biggest piece of humble pie I've ever eaten in my life, having to go from having my own venture capital company with employees to taking a starting position at an internet marketing company as a telemarketer. And I kind of looked in the mirror and I said, look, are you going to let your ego get the best of you? Or are you going to realize that you are where you are? Mainly, yes, there's been a big shakeup in the economy, but as you can see, there are still people doing well. And so if there are other people doing well, you should be able to do well. Right. And so I looked around and I realized there were people there making money. And I just started taking notes. I said, you know what, I'm going to figure this out, and I'm going to start paving the way to rise to the top of this place. And so that's what I did. I just had my blinders on, nose of grindstone, started making phone calls, started getting people interested in the services. And then I became a sales manager, I think within the first 6 months. And then I became the director of international business development, is what they, my title was at the time. I would say within a year and a half, and I actually helped them set up an office in the UK.
Nice.
And things were going really well. So how did I get to the point where I started my own company after that? It was a big Google algorithm, and that company was a company that was specializing in SEO, and that was really their bread and butter. And Google decided to do two major algorithm updates back to back, which were known as Penguin and Panda back in, it's like circa 2011, 2012.
I think they recently did another one, is my understanding.
Yeah, they're doing them all the time. I actually just got done grinding out a very long article that I submitted to Forbes, which will probably go live in about a week.
Nice.
And it's all about the latest Google algorithm, which is called it's Core Web Vitals and Page Experience Update. So they do these pretty often. And if you're not prepared and don't keep your finger on the pulse with Google, it could really be a painful surprise. Now, in the defense of my old company, this was a time that Google was operating a little more of a black box. So they had, a guy named Matt Cutts that worked for Google that would, once a week do these kind of video blogs and talk about what Google's looking for, but he was always vague and never really told you exactly what the ranking factors are, probably because they didn't want people to know the secret sauce and try to, game the system. And so long story short, over that year of the two major algorithm updates, my prior company started to have some trouble. And they were suddenly in a position where they were losing clients. Clients were losing rankings. And of course, me as somebody who really cares about my clients and the people that I bring into a business endeavor, or people that are, trusted my advice, my guidance to do marketing in this case. For me, it didn't sit well with me. I immediately started thinking, this is a great company. They were very good at what they did. They got to Inc. 500 status in, I don't know, something like 7 years, 5 years, something like that. And so they were doing great, but they're just not, the pivot isn't happening enough, at least for me. Mm-hmm. And so I started to think about, maybe there's a way to build a better mousetrap. Maybe there's more to marketing than just SEO. And I already kind of knew that from working there, and people asking me about other services, whether it be social media marketing or web design. And there were just certain things my company didn't do at that time, and that I felt like it was a missed opportunity. And so the long and short of it is, at some point, I guess there was a tipping point where, a couple of the other leaders had already left the company and started their own. And at some point, they invited me to join with them and to work at their company. And so we basically became partners. I put in my notice that company. It was tough. I really admired the CEO there. He loved me working there. I was, a very important part of his company, and he didn't want me to go. He tried keeping me longer. And I just felt like it was time for a change. So I felt bad because I really did like him and like the company. And I enjoyed working there. And so it was, and I'm a loyal guy. And so it was very difficult. But we decided to get our company going, and I put in the proper notice there, and we said, hey, let's try to be that end-to-end marketing agency that people seem to want. It was becoming clear to me that a lot of people out there with businesses had fragmented marketing campaigns. They're working with multiple vendors. It was just getting messy. And I said, let's help people clean up that mess and bring it all into one place. And so that was really our sort of mission at the time. And we really strived to do that. And we had to kind of knock down one service at a time and master it. And the first couple of years of our business, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. I mean, we were very fortunate to score a big account early on, which helped fund a lot of our ideas. But that client didn't stay forever. And when they left, it was a bit of a wake-up call, because we had built all these different departments and things. And suddenly there was a massive loss of revenue just after the first year of being in business.
And I think that's just to interject real quick, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs make. And I myself made that same mistake the first 2 years of my business, where I think at one point I had like 70% of my revenue coming from one company. And, if that dries up, I mean, again, that's a significant loss, 70%. You can't live off 30%. Yep. So I think one of the things that entrepreneurs need to do, especially, budding ones, is ensure that they're kind of, hedging and, don't have all their eggs in one basket, and make sure to kind of diversify the customer portfolio, because things do happen. COVID happens, companies go out of business, they get acquired, leadership changes, and it happens all the time. And so I think that's a good message that you kind of, put out there in the ether, because it's a lot of people get caught that way, and companies go out of business because they just, again, invest too much around one account.
That's exactly what happened. And it sounds like we had a similar experience there. And it certainly was a learning opportunity. And, anytime we make a big mistake in life in general, that's what we have to do, right? We have to just learn how do we do things differently next time. And that's unfortunately exactly what we did. Was we had kind of all our eggs in that basket, and we didn't think they were going anywhere. And we were really focused on trying to make that client happy. And we weren't focused enough on, getting a lot of other clients and diversifying. And so that tunnel vision, unfortunately, blindsided us a little bit early on. But as I said, it was a wake up call, and we were able to, thankfully, we had put some money aside from that campaign, and we were able to grind it out. And I think that was one of those moments where I wasn't sure if I made a mistake by starting my own company. Truth be told, it was really my wife, she wasn't at the time, but we had been together for some time already. And, I was, kind of venting about how difficult things were, and maybe I should, go back and work for somebody else. And she talked me out of it. And I think
great.
you
don't hear that often.
What's that?
You don't hear that often. Usually it's like, yes, please, this is too stressful. I want a stable paycheck. Please go back to corporate America.
Yeah. And, I think, in fact, that when we got married, that was one of the things I kind of vaguely mentioned in our vows, was that moment, because she believed in me more than I believed in myself at that time. And it was nice to have someone that has your back and gives you that reassurance and reminds you, hey, you've accomplished some pretty impressive things over the years, is what she told me. And, you should have the confidence to get through this. And I think it will pay off if you stick it out. And, from that moment, that's exactly what I did. I said, you know what, I'm not going to just give up when the times get tough here. I'm going to stick this out. And I'm kind of in control of my own destiny now with my company. And I need to prove that I can do this. And so we really worked hard for that year following the loss of that big client, and did diversify, and did, get many clients all over the country, and all kinds of different industries, and cast a really wide net, built a sales team, and experienced a nice, steady 7 years of growth every single year until COVID happened. And that was where things started to get a little turbulent again. But I'm happy to say that, we've stabilized and got through that, which was another big recent challenge we had to get through, like many people.
Yeah, I think many people, and also too, I think about entrepreneurship is that, I akin it to a house of cards. Even though I've been in business 4.5 years, almost 5 years, I've got a client base, life's relatively good, and we're stable, but you never know. I mean, COVID was a huge wake up call for me. I think there's about 6 or 7 weeks straight where literally I couldn't get customers to answer my calls, even customers I've been working with for 2 years. And so you just never know what's going to happen. And, I think part of that though is perseverance. You got to get up every day, you got to work every day, and you got to fight every day. And that's really kind of the best way to get through the situations similar to COVID or losing your biggest account.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So you've been in business 8 years. You guys have an end-to-end, digital agency. What is your role now at the company? I mean, I realize you're CEO, but that's a bit nebulous. I mean, are you kind of, number one business development individual? Are you kind of, face of the company, out and about? Are you working on ops? Like, what does your role look like now?
That's a great question. I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag. As probably a lot of mid-sized companies experience, when you are working full time for your own business, you end up wearing a lot of hats. And of course, we're striving to always make that as organized as possible and more siloed. It's, I think, one of the pitfalls that many businesses run into is they get caught up in too many different activities, and they can't really scale up because of that messiness. So that's really been, I think, the last year since following COVID, has been one of our focal points is strengthening the foundation and making sure that we're highly organized and that we know what the duties and responsibilities are of the other partners. Because I do have two business partners, and I think that the first 6 years or so that we were in business, we're really shooting from the hip a lot of the time. Just kind of rolling with the punches and grinding and running a company and doing pretty good at it, considering we were more or less sales managers from another company that started a business together. All of us with our own life experiences and business experiences, but we weren't formally groomed to run a marketing agency, I guess you could say. We had experiences that came in handy, but there was still a lot to learn, and a lot that we did learn as we were getting going. So I think, fast forward to now, we were able to, right before COVID started, actually, we hired someone that was originally consulting our business, and later we made him our COO. And he was able to be on the outside and look in and say, here are where you guys are falling short. Here are the areas that you need to improve. And he was very good at laying that out. And he made what he called a State of the Union speech, and dissected our company, put it under a microscope, and told us where our shortcomings were and where we could improve. And it was a tough pill to swallow to hear some of those things. But at the same time, that's how we all get better, is you find out where you're making mistakes, and you try to improve. And so that's what we did, and it's worked out quite well. We've become more integrated. We really want to be able to practice what we preach, and not only help people with their online marketing and their integrated marketing strategy, but in order to really effectively do that, we have to accomplish that and be good at it ourselves. Right. And so I think that this past year, especially with how rapidly things are changing and how fast technology is accelerating into just a completely different dimension, we have to sort of keep up with this light speed of change and dial in our own business. And so we really have focused on that this past year, and are now confidently offering those solutions. Actually, just this past month, we started ramping up our own online marketing campaign after we launched our new website with all the new web copy that speaks to the challenges that businesses have experienced this past year, especially. And so I'm really excited about this next chapter in our business. I feel like we have a much better foundation, and we're ready to help people, thrive in the new normal that we're all living in.
Yeah, no, I think you brought up a good point. It's all about knowing your identity, right? And knowing kind of what you do well, and what you don't do well, or maybe what you shouldn't be doing. And, I've been in business for 4.5 years. And I think, just within the last month, I had an epiphany in regards to kind of my company's identity and where we need to be in the marketplace specifically. And I've been dead set from that point forward on where we're going to play. And I think it's really important for any company that's looking to grow is distilling it down to the things that you do well, and putting a bit, creating a business around that and productizing that, if you will. When I first started, it was, we were more kind of like a jack of all trades, which is a master of none. And that's also really hard to articulate. It's really hard to kind of come up with a tight value proposition if you do everything.
Right.
And so I think it's really important to kind of, again, know your company's identity, what you do well, and of course, eat your own dog food, which it seems like you guys have begun doing, which is important in your space, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. So a couple of other questions, just jumping in here. You mentioned that, when you first started your company, you had some partners, and you explained pretty clearly on kind of how that came to, which is great. You also mentioned that you were lucky enough to kind of find your first account, which is a large account within the first year. What did that look like? I mean, did you leverage existing relationships? Did you get lucky with a cold call? And what were you doing prior? How were you kind of floating the business prior to landing this account? And how'd you expand from there?
Yeah, I would say at the very beginning, there was a lot of self-funding. We all three of us were making pretty good money at our previous company. And we were able to pivot quickly enough to where we didn't start experiencing, at least to a detrimental degree, of the loss of that good income. It certainly started to dip before we left. And, we were able to put our resources together to start the company. And very early on, one of my business partners had a business connection through another person that he knows. And they were able to bring the opportunity to the table for us. And, because we all have sales backgrounds, myself and my two business partners, I think that really helped us facilitate the deal. We were at a place where our company was very new, and which made the sales process even harder to convince a large national franchise to do business with you when you are so new. Takes a lot of salesmanship, I guess you could say. But we were able to put together a very compelling proposal, and they liked us. And so they decided to give us a shot. And so, we're very fortunate to have scored that deal very early in the development of our company. And it certainly helped fuel and propel us into the next chapter of our business. And I think without that deal, we probably wouldn't have been able to survive.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. And I've been there as well. I think it took me 7 months to find my first customer, which is a long time. I did relatively well prior to jumping out, built a house, had my second kid, married. And then I decided to jump out of corporate America. And so you really, you got to find success quickly. And it's a very, very nerve-wracking situation. I think most people don't and can't grasp what it's really like. No paycheck coming in. And then once you get a customer, you're still dependent on their payment terms, net 30, net 60, maybe you don't get paid until project's complete. It's a hairy situation, but then you get the first customer and it's kind of like, all right, we did this, rinse and repeat. You basically try to replicate that model and then go find other customers in the marketplace where you did similar business.
Yeah.
Or could do similar business. Yeah.
Yeah. It's I think that is one of the things that a lot of people find outside of their comfort zone. I don't think that everyone wants to or has the ability, or however you want to put it. I guess you could say the grit to grind through dry moments in a business or tough times. And in our case, and it sounds like you may have experienced this yourself too. There were several months where not only was I not getting paid and working my tail off, I was actually taking money out of my IRA account and putting it into the business and paying the penalties of cashing that out prematurely. Yes. That is something a lot of people would just not do. And believe me, it is much more comfortable working for another business than it is running your own business.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people like that feeling of comfort and safety, and I don't blame them. I certainly miss the ability to just be able to punch out at the end of the day and, not think about the business. And I don't think I can do that anymore. And I think one of the things I'd say that has been challenging running a company is that feeling of not being able to, at least for me, feel like I can mentally check out, and I just kind of always have it on my mind. It has its pros and cons of running a business.
Yeah, I think that working at a company, there's a false security with that, and I think COVID's shown us, better than anything, that you're not necessarily any safer, right? Yes, you have a weekly recurring paycheck, but that doesn't. You can still get laid off, right? And I had a similar situation as well, where I leveraged some of my IRA too, just for the first few months to kind of keep things going. I promised my wife no change in lifestyle, which is probably not a good decision. So I kind of was in the same situation, same boat, totally get it. And also too, when you're not finding success, you're wondering, hey, is the business model flawed? Am I flawed? Was my hunch incorrect? And all these things are going on behind the scenes. And it's a pretty interesting situation. But again, then you find a little bit of success, and you really need to sit down and figure out how you can turn that little win into more wins. And the one thing that I've kind of seen with regards to entrepreneurship is the biggest trait, and I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on this, but perseverance. I think that, perseverance has kind of helped me stay in business and get past, those 3-4 extra months that I needed to start my company. When I first started, I really thought that it was going to take me 3 months to begin getting revenue. And then within 8 months, I replaced my income. And oh man, it was far from that. I think perseverance is what made me get to the place where I am now, because I never gave up and kept fighting and digging for gold.
Yep.
Yeah. So what do you think that the number one trait for entrepreneurs that find success is versus those that don't?
I think that could be it. I feel like just having that drive and the tenacity and just the willingness to continue to grind, even when you might not be finding the oil that you're digging for, right, or the gold that you're looking for, and you're just digging and it's just not happening. But and to get through that is it's a mental battle. And I feel that maybe it's my life experiences that I had where I went through some pretty crazy times in my childhood. Possibly that's what I guess molded me into who I am, and for me, I was able to get through it perhaps because of that. And maybe for other people who had much more stable upbringings and maybe they're even wired differently, they just don't want to stomach it, or maybe they just don't have the desire to go through that. It's certainly a choice. In my case, I could have continued working at the company I was at, or got a job somewhere else, and I suppose that would have probably been easier. But I've always had this drive and this desire to run my own company, as I mentioned earlier, ever since I was young. So I think that's where that where that came from.
Yeah, me too. And also, you have to just embrace the suck. I mean, you mentioned earlier that you wish you could turn it off, and I feel that way sometimes. But I've also too come to the realization and conclusion that this is the path I've chosen, right? And so when I go on vacation, if I'm going to go out on the beach on just pick a random day, a Thursday, I'm going to need to pick up my iPad or get on my phone and go through some emails for 30 minutes before I'm kind of reach that level of comfortability that I can walk away. And when I first started my company, I struggled with that because I wanted to be able to completely unplug. And that was one of the reasons I want to start doing my own thing. But then I finally realized that that's not the path that I chose. Right. And so ever since I came to the realization that was not going away, and I've been able to kind of embrace it. And it's part of it. I'm going on vacation tomorrow for a few days and bring an iPad, and I will be doing some work. So when I get back to work on Tuesday, my inbox is small and I don't have a lot of catch up. Just part of what we chose.
Yeah, I suppose for folks like us that are running a company and have a similar mindset, that it's less stressful to just check the email for 30 minutes than to think what's going on with my business, and just no, I'm not turning on any devices today. I'm just going to relax on the beach. Well, it sounds like you might be in the same boat as me, where you can't really relax unless you feel like everything's under control. 100%. So I'm the same way. I think I've gotten better at it. Probably you too, with taking a vacation and being able, for the most part, to enjoy it and focus on spending time with my family or whatever it is I'm doing, and try to shut that off. But I always leave the line of communication open in case something comes up that needs my attention. But I think part of growing a business is hopefully part of the goal is to get to a place where you can rely on others, and where you can get people to have your back, and for the most part, keep the gears turning while you're not there. And I think that's something that we've improved on for sure over the years, but it doesn't mean that we can completely turn off, right? So I feel you on that one. I'm kind of in the same boat. I'd say, check the emails maybe in the morning, then maybe at night, and then have my phone on just in case.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's what we signed up for, unfortunately. So if you could go back, to a younger Dennis and give yourself, one piece of advice, prior to starting your company, what would that be? What would you have done a little bit differently?
Not take things for granted. And specifically in this case, I'm referring to that large client that we had. I think that we were, almost a borderline fat cat syndrome pretty early on from that client, and felt like we just had this blind confidence that they're going to stick around, and then we're going to get other companies like them. And I think that it was very humbling experience to realize that, wait a minute, they can just leave when the contract's up. And then what are you going to do then? And so if I can go back in time and sit down with myself before we started the company, I would have said, don't take things for granted. Assume you're going to lose that deal. And then what are you going to do when you lose that deal? And then while you have the deal, what are you going to do to stabilize the company and make sure that it's not going to rock the boat when they do leave? And I don't think we were thinking that way. I just feel like we were fat and happy, so to speak, and just really enjoying that deal and kind of focusing on that client and nurturing that relationship. And, one of those things happen where you just don't know what's going to happen. Well, what happens when that relationship you nurtured is with somebody who leaves that company? So I guess you don't know what you don't know, but we didn't see that coming. We didn't think about it. And running a business is certainly a chess game. You have to think multiple steps ahead and plan for the worst. As we can see, especially with this past year, you just don't know what's going to happen. And you have to be as prepared as possible. And sometimes that's still not enough.
No, that's great. That's very sage advice. And I kind of had a similar situation as well. It's funny how there's similarities. We do different things. We're from different places, but a lot of similarities in our stories. Same thing happened to me. I had it was like my second or third client, got them. They're big, and they're big for me, especially. They got acquired 6 months into our relationship by a very large company, which I knew would preclude me from having a relationship with them. So I was out. Then the big learning experience for me was that you always continuously have to be hustling. Always have to be hustling, always looking for new business, new relationships. Because those situations will present themselves. And then conversely, the flip side of that is that sometimes you have to fire customers. I fired 2 customers in the last 3 weeks that just, no longer kind of fit the mold in regards to what I, expect out of a partner of mine. So again, you need to be hustling, and you can't take relationships for granted because they change, be it on their side or your own side.
That's right. Yeah. I think that's, we certainly learned from that, and I ever since then, believe me, we've been grinding, and even though we've experienced nice growth for straight 7 years, we still worked hard. And I think we were all a little bit damaged from that experience, and knew that anything could happen at any time. And I feel like we all worked harder after that moment.
Absolutely. No, it's very interesting. And again, just in recent days, I've had a few things fall out of the sales funnel that were just about guaranteed. And so you never know. And if you don't have enough, I don't want to say residual, but enough things kind of in the hopper or the funnel, that's really where you expose yourself. Yeah.
It's an old sales tactic too, is, to not, when it comes to business development, get so focused on one deal you think you have, or one hot lead. It's all about continuing to make sure you have a full pipeline. And so that if one falls out, it doesn't emotionally wreck you that you lost that deal. Right. So, we've gotten really good at that too. It's just trying to make sure that we have a steady flow of leads coming in at all times. So, we always have new business, and inevitably some people are going to back out, or it's not going to go through. And that's why it's important to keep that lead generation going and to keep that pipeline full.
It could pipeline or no pipeline. It can still be a bit tough to stomach. I mean, last week I had a couple of things that were pretty significant that just kind of disappeared. And again, they were sure things, and it still hurt, even though I've got the full funnel, and I'm not too concerned about them, lacking or not being in our revenue number. It still hurt. It's still
for sure.
I took it personally a little bit, which happened.
Yeah, I felt one of those this week. So I know, believe me, I'm not, I guess I'm not completely calloused. I still feel it a little bit too. I think I've gotten better at taking those punches to the chin, but they still sting a little bit for sure.
Absolutely. So let's get to the lightning round here. Just gonna ask you a few questions real quick, burn through them. So what's your favorite aspect about being your own boss?
I would say the feeling that I'm in control, even though that's probably not real. I've learned through a lot of just life coaching and stuff like that over the years, that my desire to feel like I'm in control is from not having a lot of control when I was younger. And it's funny because I've traveled a lot, and I've flown all over the world and done all these things, right? But I still am not comfortable on planes. And, part of that reason is because I'm not the one with the steering wheel. And so I feel like my fate is in someone else's hands. And I really don't like that feeling. And logically, planes are super safe. I mean, they're way safer than driving. Yet when I drive my car, I feel like I'm in total control. I feel very comfortable.
No anxiety. Yeah.
None. I feel great. And so I love driving. I don't like flying, but I fly all the time. I just flew again last week. So, I mean, I do it and I get through it because I know it's my own problem. And and strangely enough, I feel like maybe that's one of the things I love about running my own company is I don't have that kind of looming anxiety of like what's going to happen or what, it's just, I feel like I have this kind of, I'm in control of my own destiny is how I feel. Whether that's true or not, that's the feeling I like of running a business.
It doesn't matter if it's true or not, right? Whatever keeps you going.
Whatever helps me sleep at night, right? Right.
So what's your least favorite part about being your own boss?
Kind of what you were talking about, just, I find myself having a difficult time at times where I should check out and should turn off and not think about the business. And, it could just be, had a really heavy day at work. A lot of stuff happened and I try to, go have dinner with my family and it's sometimes hard to just focus and
you're like halfway there. And I do the same
right.
Halfway there, or I'll tell my wife sometimes too. It's like, I need 10 minutes. Just give me 10 minutes. Let me tie this thing off.
Yeah.
And I can be with you guys. Otherwise, you're going to get 50% of me and nobody wins.
Hey, that's good advice. I should probably try that out. Sometimes I just, I can find my mind wandering a little bit or check out and someone might notice that it doesn't look like I'm 100% focused and on being present in that moment. It's definitely something I'm becoming more aware of and working on. But I would say that feeling of not being able to turn it off or check out, I didn't have that feeling before when I was working for somebody else. I felt like I was able to go have fun and do whatever and not think about it. And I think that's the one thing that I'm not a huge fan of. It's something I'm trying to get a better handle on, but
it's a struggle, man. Same way. Like I would take off when I worked at corporate America to go play golf, completely relaxed because everybody I was off and they knew not to disturb me. And now if I go play golf, it's generally the busiest day for whatever reason. It's just how it works out. But I'm busy. I'm getting calls. Things are blowing up, and it's less enjoyable. But again, it's part of the plight of the entrepreneur, what we signed up for.
We're living a similar life in that regard with golf too, by the way.
Yeah. So what would you consider your biggest success?
I'd say the biggest success, the first thing that comes to mind is that big account we landed when we started the company, which I guess you could say is also our biggest failure was losing that client. So I would say that's what comes to mind first. But I think more recently, just being able to get through another really turbulent, uncertain time this past year and still be able to keep our head above water and run a business and help other people also keep their head above water. And I feel very good about that. And that gives me a sense of accomplishment that stability of feeling like I can get through anything with the business. So that I would say more recently is a big sense of accomplishment that I've had with the company.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's a great perspective too. I feel most companies, if you can make it through situations such as COVID, like you're golden. I mean, that's the way that I'm kind of treating this whole thing. Like revenues were up this past year, not as high as I thought they would be and not as high as probably they should be, but made it through. And so if I can get through that crap, right. I'm not even worried about it.
Right.
So I was going to ask about your biggest failure, but I think you've alluded to that a couple of times about losing your biggest account.
Yeah.
It's bound to happen to any entrepreneur out there. It's happened to me, happened to you. Now it's kind of old hat, to be honest with you. Like you're going to get accounts and things are going to happen. People are going to leave, et cetera. What would you say the hardest part about having your own business is? Is that the inability to unplug? Is it kind of the stress? Like, I'm up at 3 a.m. almost every day. Like what is the hardest part?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I woke up today at 4 a.m. with no alarm, and I went to bed at 11. So,
you need more sleep, Dennis.
What's that?
You need more sleep.
I do. Yeah. No, I usually get 6 hours and I feel like that's enough sleep. Maybe it's not. But yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing that's been tough too, is with so many things on my mind and, that comes from the business. It just really occupies your brain a lot of the time. And I feel like that's what keeps me up sometimes at night, and what makes me rise early is I just have all these things that I know that I need to do or take care of, or goals or things that we're striving towards that I'm just, really eager to accomplish or achieve. And so because of that, you don't sleep like a baby at night. At least I don't, and get maybe the needed 8 hours of sleep or whatever it is. I know it's a little bit different for everybody, but I probably use more than 5 to 6 hours of sleep a night. I would imagine.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. What I've started doing, and you've been doing this thing longer than me, so I should probably take an advice from you. But like, I've put like a notepad next to my bed. Of course, my phone, the blue light's off, and if I come up with an idea or something goes through that I know I need to take care of, I'll just go ahead and just pony up and write it down.
It's good.
I feel that kind of allows my mind to escape a little bit, and most of the time I go to sleep. And that doesn't happen every night. I mean, and as you know, sometimes too, you'll be dreaming or something will happen, and you'll just like wake up and like, oh man, this is genius. I got to try this tomorrow. And then it can be kind of comical looking back at your notepad about what you wrote down, because it's completely nonsense. But yeah. So something I've tried, and it's been helpful for me. So it's great, man. I really appreciate you joining. In closing, where can people find you and find more about you?
Yeah. So our website is dymic.com. That's dymic.com, kind of like short for dynamic. It's not a real word, but that's the website URL.
We'll put it on the video as well.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I would say that's the primary place. I'm also a contributor on Forbes, so keep an eye out for my articles. I try to get them out there about once a quarter. I do have one coming out. It's supposed to be in the next week or two. And it's if you have any interest in what Google's doing and their search algorithm, I spent a long time writing that article, more than I'd like to admit.
Sure.
And so there's a lot of good information in there.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, Dennis, really appreciate you taking the time today. Sincerely, I appreciate it. We'll put up your information so people know how to find you, and keep fighting the good fight, my man.
You too. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, likewise.
All right, we'll be in touch. Bye for now.